Aloha, Inspired Moneymaker. Thanks for joining today. If this is your first time here, welcome. And if you're a returning viewer or listener, welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. Last week, we discussed wine pairings. This week, we're talking about wine and wine regions. So imagine this. You're sipping on a glass of wine at a sun-drenched vineyard in Tuscany. The breeze carries a scent of rosemary and lavender, and just beyond the terrace, rows of Sangiovese vines stretch toward the horizon. You're not just on vacation, you're on a journey through history, culture, and flavor. For many of us, wine starts as a casual pleasure, a favorite bottle shared with friends or discovered over dinner. But as our love for wine grows, so does our curiosity. Where did this come from? Why does it taste like this? And maybe the biggest question of all, where can I go to experience this at the source? That's what today's episode is all about. Whether you're dreaming of retirement travels or just mapping out your next wine adventure, we're diving into the most inspiring wine regions to explore, from legendary old world vineyards to exciting new world discoveries. We're going to talk about what makes each destination unique, how local culture and cuisine deepens your appreciation, and even how to turn your passion into a long-term investment or sustainable lifestyle. So whether you're a seasoned collector, a curious traveler, or someone who simply loves a good glass of wine, you are in the right place. Stay with us because we've got a panel of incredible guests who are going to guide us through the world's most fascinating wine journeys. Before we start, a quick thank you to our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by my family-owned firm, Runnymede Capital Management, where we help you to plan, invest, and worry less. Since 1993, our fiduciary advisors have guided individuals, families, and business owners toward their financial goals, and personalized planning and investment is the key to that. As a fee-only firm, your interests always come first. Here's something to think about. Only 36% of Americans have a written financial plan. But among those who do, 76% feel more in control. Why? Because a plan gives you clarity and confidence. And I don't have to tell you that clarity and confidence today goes a really long way. So get started today with a free financial plan at inspiredmoney.fm/getplan. In just 3 minutes, you can see when you can retire and explore ways to improve your future. If you have questions about the output, I'm happy to schedule a call with you. Let's make your money work harder together. Now let's bring in our guest panelists. We have a couple of returning guests from last week. I'm grateful for their willingness to continue last week's wine conversation. We have Madeline Puckette, a certified sommelier, award-winning author and co-founder of Folly, a leading platform for wine education, known for its visually engaging and approachable style. She's the co-author of Wine Folly, The Essential Guide to Wine, a James Beard award-winning book that's helped demystify wine for enthusiasts and professionals alike by blending design, data visualization, and expert knowledge. Madeline, you're back for more.
Heck yes, why not? Let's do this.
I'm so glad. And Yannick Benjamin is also back. He's a New York-based sommelier, entrepreneur, and advocate, best known as the co-founder of Contento Restaurant and Beaupierre Wines and Spirits, both built on principles of accessibility, inclusivity, and community. A wheelchair user since 2003, Benjamin has become a celebrated figure in the wine world, earning accolades such as Sommelier of the Year by the Michelin Guide, and co-founding Wine on Wheels, a nonprofit uniting wine professionals for charitable causes. Yannick, you are also back, and you've been in hospitality since, I think, age 13 or something.
Yes, thanks for having me back. It's great to be here.
Thanks for coming back. And now our newcomers to the panel, we have Amanda Barnes, Master of Wine. She is an award-winning wine writer and the leading expert on South American wines, celebrated for her book, The South America Wine Guide. A masterful storyteller and presenter, she brings the wines, people, and places of Latin America to life with insight, authenticity, and adventure. Amanda, you are coming to us from Mendoza, Argentina.
Yeah, direct from the Andes. It's a pleasure to be here.
You gave us a little peek at the view.
Oh yeah, I can try. I can try, but it's a bit hazy today. But there you can just see the foothills of the Andes in the distance.
Beautiful, and I suspect we're going to be talking about how the mountains and the environment shape the wines of where you are.
I certainly hope so.
Rounding out our panel today, we have Alder Yarrow. He's founder of vinography.com, widely recognized as a pioneer of wine blogging and one of the wine world's most respected voices. He's the author of the award-winning book, The Essence of Wine, and the architect and day-to-day manager of the Old Vine Registry, the world's leading database of historic vineyards. Alder, welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Once again, I'm excited for this conversation. I'm not much of a wine drinker myself. When I drink, I get very red-faced. So I am a blank slate looking to learn a lot today. Let's jump right in and get into segment one.
Old World wine regions emphasize tradition and terroir, producing wines with higher acidity and subtle complexity. Bordeaux blends Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, with left bank wines showing firm tannins and right bank wines offering softer, fruit-driven profiles. Tuscany's Sangiovese-based wines balance bright acidity and structure. New World regions focus on varietal expression and modern techniques. Napa Valley's diverse microclimates produce bold Cabernet Sauvignon, while Mendoza's high-altitude vineyards create structured Malbec. Emerging regions bring unique characteristics. Georgia's Qvevri-aged wines highlight ancient techniques. South Africa's Cape Winelands showcase Chenin Blanc and Pinotage, and Uruguay's Tannat is gaining recognition. Terroir, climate, soil, and topography shapes every wine. Visiting during optimal seasons enhances the experience, with Bordeaux and Tuscany ideal in fall, Napa in summer, and Mendoza from October to April. Each region offers distinct wines and a deeper understanding of viniculture.
Alder, you've tasted thousands of wines. What's a region that consistently surprises you in terms of terroir expression?
Well, I'm particularly excited these days about South Africa, which you mentioned in the video there. I think South Africa is completely on fire. The wines coming out of that country are fantastic, as good as they've ever been. And really, they've got a bunch of natural assets like old vines and varieties that are specific to that region that make them a particularly exciting place from a purely wine perspective. But when you add to that the amazing landscape that's just stunningly beautiful and a really incredible kind of farm to table food scene, it becomes a really attractive place to go visit and taste wine.
What do we need to think about when it comes to old world versus new world? Is there a distinction that we need to be thoughtful about?
Well, I think everybody here should weigh in on that. It's a topic of conversation amongst wine communicators like us these days, and I think the general consensus is that those distinctions don't really matter so much anymore, because there are a lot of different styles of wines made in different places, and you can no longer truly generalize about what old world tastes like and what new world tastes like.
Madeline, what are your thoughts? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah. Feel free. No, it's
I was just going to say, I absolutely second what Alder says. I think old world, new world is a distinction that we shouldn't really be using anymore, because you have some incredible kind of history in the new world wine regions. I mean, here in Chile and Argentina, we have vines that are 300 years old and still producing great wines. And then you have lots of new wine regions in the old world, like England, for example, which, you know, is a relatively kind of new history of making significant quantities of wine. So I feel like that's the kind of old-fashioned distinction which doesn't really ring true to the history you can have on either continents, and then also the styles, which can be really diverse and quite different within one region.
Amanda, since you've lived and traveled extensively through South America's wine regions, is there a lesser known destination that retirees should consider exploring?
Depends how adventurous the retiree is, because a lot of the wine regions of South America require a lot of traveling and require a lot of time, normally by car, moving between the vineyards. So if you're an adventurous retiree, there are lots. And I would say that, Bolivia is one of the most incredible travel destinations to visit. Some really interesting vineyards, but it's pretty intense. You do need to kind of get used to the high altitude. The comfort levels are quite low compared to the standard of living people might be used to in the US. So there are some adventurous destinations like Bolivia or southern Chile or even Peru, and then there are much more kind of comfortable destinations like Mendoza, where we have a lot of wineries all close to each other, very kind of high level of luxury accommodation, really beautiful wineries. Also certain parts of the Central Valley of Chile and Uruguay is also a really easy and comfortable destination to work around. So retiree, I mean, it really depends how adventurous you are and what kind of travel you want to do. But there's definitely a wine region for you, whatever your style is in South America.
Good to know, especially since retirees come in many different ages and levels of activity. So it sounds like there's something for everyone. Madeline, your thoughts?
31-year-old Peruvian retiree very recently in his early 30s who came to do the wine country in different parts of South America. So absolutely, retiree could be anyone.
That's the best.
Yeah, so I've been traveling also, and I guess a bit more adventurous, but rediscovering sort of famous wine regions through a different interpretation, which is on a bicycle. And we've been doing a series on YouTube on the bike, going to different regions, trying to actually feel the terroir. And I was in Alto Adige last year, and I'll be going to southern Portugal this year on that same kind of experience. And the reason I like this way of looking at wineries is getting on something where you're exposed to the air. You actually feel the climate a bit more. You feel actually how the grapes are growing in every region, and you can feel the cold spots and you can feel the hot spots and you can feel the elevation, especially on a bike if you're pedaling. So one of the things that I've been doing as I've been in California is hosting several rides in different wine country locations. I'm going to have one coming up in Paso Robles and in Sonoma. And I'm excited because these areas are actually, not only are they world-class wine destinations, but they're world-class cycling destinations as well. So there's really sort of an amazing mood happening in this area that is exciting, where we're seeing more people with a little bit more adventurous spirit wanting to see wine and wine agritourism a little bit differently. Like they might stay in a really nice hotel, but then they're popping on the bike in the morning and onto an adventure to maybe buy some wines, but maybe not have them while they're out adventuring, maybe have them later in the evening when they come back to a place to stay.
I love combining those two passions, and I see the bike behind you.
Yeah.
What should we know about, the air temperature and the elements that you're experiencing on your bike? How does that shape the taste of grapes and the wines?
It's actually an amazing question that you really do feel on the bike. When you start in the morning, it's cool, and often in wine country, it's sunny. And so you feel the warmth of the sun, and it's very real nice. And I think the grapes and the vines feel that too. And that's one of their highest amount of growth periods during the day is in the morning when they're just getting started. And then in the afternoon, it gets hot. And when you're over 90 degrees, and cyclists don't like this either, you stop growing, and the grapes actually stop producing growth at over 90 degrees. They're very sensitive, just like we are. They kind of grow in the same climates that we like to grow in. And they stop growing. So if it's too hot in an area, it's really not a good place to grow wine grapes. And also some areas that have hot climates become windy in the afternoon, and you can feel that wind. And the wind, when you're on a bike, you can definitely feel the wind. It gets very hard to cycle in the direction that the wind, going against the wind. But that wind can actually help moderate the temperatures of the vines, keep things cool. It can also help develop very thick skins on the grapes, and the grapes with very thick skins tend to have more flavor in the wine. So windy in a region isn't necessarily a bad thing for growing grapes. And so when you're riding a bike, you really do feel those things when physically on your body.
Yannick, you want to chime in?
I mean, you were mentioning for retirees. I mean, one of my favorite journeys is, if you can do it, is flying into like the south of France and kind of go island hopping. I mean, it does require a little work and some good organization, but I think, you know, you go from Corsica down to Sardinia, and then you end up in Sicily, and then fly into maybe Rome and spend a couple of days there. I think not only are you visiting special places, but you're kind of visiting the ancient world and also getting this kind of cultural aspect of what wine brings to the table. I mean, that's just one aspect of it. But, you know, generally speaking, when we talk about wine regions, I mean, very rarely, I don't think I've ever been to a wine region where it didn't offer some kind of beauty to it. They're magnificent, they're peaceful, they're serene. And I think that, you know, I think what you have to really think about, most importantly, is when you go visit a wine region, incorporate the cultural aspects to it. I mean, I've never been to Argentina myself, but I'm very much looking forward to the day that I do go to kind of go and to spend time in Buenos Aires and major cities and really understand the socioeconomic and cultural kind of traditions of that country as well. And I think that all kind of comes together.
Yannick, as someone who curates wine lists with a global lens, how do you approach discovering new regions, and what do you look for?
You know, for me, I'm certainly very much influenced and very grateful for, Instagram, for example. A lot of great sommeliers, people like, you know, Alder and Amanda and Madeline who shared their travels. I mean, certainly I remember when Madeline did that bike trip with Aldo Somm and the Alto Adige. And certainly I learned a lot from that. You know, the articles that Alder definitely puts out are very beneficial. You know, Amanda has that incredible book. I mean, most of the stuff, and I thought I knew a little bit about South America. When you read that book, I mean, I know nothing about it. It's just unbelievable. And so that's where I get my source of information. And then I just kind of go into the rabbit hole from there.
Yeah, so you enjoy the research and learning.
Yeah, exactly.
Anybody else want to add?
Well, just researching wine is always more fun because you're tasting while you do it, right? Like, it's, you know, not just reading, you got to taste.
Yes, it's got to be reading, watching, tasting, feeling, smelling. It's all the senses. All right, let's move to segment 2.
Winemaking dates back over 8,000 years to Mesopotamia, spreading through Egypt, Greece, and Rome, where it played a role in religion and daily life. Monasteries preserved techniques during the Middle Ages, while the Renaissance and Enlightenment refined viticulture. Today, climate change and technology continue to shape production. Wine festivals celebrate tradition. Argentina's Grape Harvest Festival marks the start of harvest, while France's Beaujolais Nouveau Day honors the release of young wine. Spain's Batalla del Vino is a playful wine battle, and Germany's Rheingau Festival highlights Riesling. Traditional methods like Georgia's amphora-aged wines and gravity-fed cellars maintain regional identity. Pairings like Chianti with Tuscan cuisine or Malbec with Argentine Asado reflect history and local flavors. Visiting wine routes, museums, and cultural tours offers deeper insight into the heritage that shapes the wines of today.
Amanda, are there wine festivals in Argentina or Chile that especially are impactful in showcasing the traditions?
Yeah, there's loads of festivals. every kind of weekend is an excuse for a festival or a public holiday. Mendoza has one of the biggest wine festivals in the world, which is the big Vendimia, the Harvest Festival, which is normally the first weekend of March. And there you get, you know, parades, you get music, you get lots of the traditional kind of folkloric music as well. But I would say that any time of the year, you know, if you're coming to Chile as well, they have harvest festivals in Argentina. from January through to about April or May. And those are really nice opportunities to kind of see how the pueblo, how the kind of town celebrates and how local people celebrate. But to kind of echo what Yannick was saying, I think that when you are in a wine region, you are so naturally immersed in the culture here and in the traditions. And it's really important to open your eyes and experience that and enjoy it and, feel the importance of, the asado in Argentina and in Chile, people getting together, breaking bread, sharing food. When I was in Georgia, which is also an incredible wine region, wine regions to visit, the supra there, the big kind of feasting together. I think those kind of cultural gastronomy moments are just as important as the festivals, because you get a real feel for how, families and friends really share on a regular basis.
Yeah, Yannick was really tickling my desire to go travel. And I'm curious, Yannick, do you have a personal story where that cultural backdrop of a wine region really elevated your experience there?
I mean, certainly, I would say most of the wine regions, if not every single wine region that I've been to, totally connected with me and really profoundly had a great effect on me. I think one of the most special experiences that I ever had was when I was in Armenia, and I went to what they think is one of the oldest wine-making facilities, historically speaking, and it's the Arena 1 cave. And so, to get up there, because I'm a full-time wheelchair user, required a lot of work. And so, along with a good friend of mine, we made it up to the top, and then I had to bump myself back down. But going into this cave that was well over 6,000 years, really kind of in the middle of nowhere, was just so fascinating. And it just kind of really enforced within me how important it is that we have to try to preserve this legacy and this part of the world where really I think the civilization of wine began here in this whole kind of Armenia, Georgia, the Phoenicians in Lebanon, and you just mentioned Mesopotamia. And so when I got back, I just kind of really had this moment of enlightenment, and I just kind of talking about going into the deep diving into research and all that. That's what I've done, and that's what I continue to do. And I just that definitely was an awakening for me.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap one's head around. Is Armenia, that's 4,000 BC or something?
I mean,
before man invented the wheel.
Yes,
people were making wine in Armenia.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, Alder, because you work on the Old Vine Registry, and that ties closely to history, what's the most historically rich wine region you've visited?
Boy, oh boy. As both Yannick has said and Amanda referenced as well, many of the wine regions around the world have hundreds, if not thousands of years of history. But certainly, top of mind because both Yannick was just speaking about it, and I was just there in October, Armenia and Georgia, those two countries, which have recently sort of surfaced again in the wine world, honestly have the longest history of cultural winemaking. Georgia speaks about an unbroken history of 8,000 years of winemaking. Armenia, 6,000. And as Yannick mentioned, the oldest archaeological site of full production winemaking known to exist on the planet in this cave. You go there and the entire culture is suffused with an understanding and appreciation and a love for wine. Armenian poetry dating back thousands of years references wine. You go and visit the archaeological sites and there are bunches of grapes and figures harvesting grapes, on these, 4,000-year-old pieces of archaeology. And you really get the sense that wine is and has always been a part of this culture. And so there's a richness there for sure that I think transcends, some of the more traditionally appreciated wine regions in the world, like France or Italy. When you can look back through history, 6,000 years, 8,000 years, and think about people making wine and being known globally for wine at that time, it's pretty astonishing.
It's astonishing when it predates the wheel. That is crazy. Madeline, how do food and wine pairing traditions deepen cultural immersion for travelers?
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've served people when I was working in restaurants who'd be like, the wines were so good when I was there. I don't remember any of them, but they were amazing and they're better than what I have over here. And I think it's an interesting point, but when you are outside of your comfort zone and you're in a place where you're tasting new foods and you're tasting new wines, something magical kind of happens. And that's very true when you travel to a place, to immerse yourself in the local foods and try to understand what the local specialties are. And my example is this: I'm typically a plant-based eater, but I'll taste anything. And I was in, I was in Portugal many years ago, and it sticks in my head today. I remember seeing someone making a grandmother pulling out some like these big leaves that look like gigantic, like collard greens almost, but it's their version of cabbage. And it was a simple cabbage soup with salt in it, basically water, cabbage, and salt. And it was probably one of the most simple and incredible soups that I've ever had. Just made from a like classic grandmother cooking style. And this was in an area called Calerish, where it's right by the coast, and they have these vines that grow 4 feet up into the sand, through the sand, and then they're just going across the ground. So you pick the grapes, they're literally grapes growing on the sandy ground, and they make a very intensely flavored white wine. It's almost salty, with really beautiful yellowy, almost like amber yellow color. And then we ate these really strange, they're almost like barnacles. Again, I'm plant-based, but I'll try anything. But they're like these little barnacle animals that grow off the coast, because it's basically a coastal wine region. And so we were trying these little weird red barnacle creatures, sea creatures, with this really intensely yellowed flavored wine. And it was one of those moments where you're like, it doesn't make sense, but it makes perfect sense when you're having something in the place where it's from, including the wine. It kind of like, it's tasting the terroir.
Magical. Anyone else want to chime in with like some magical pairing that was unexpected that happened?
Not necessarily a magical pairing, but I really do think that the local food influences the wine as well. Like, I think sometimes we often kind of mysticize wine a lot to talk about just the soils and the climate, and we forget to talk about the people, the human element, which is just as important. And I think, you know, a lot of people ask me, for example, why Tannat is the champion of Uruguay. And yes, it works really well in the climate and with the soil and the different kind of areas that you have, but it works really well with the diet, which is like eating a lot of steak. You know, they eat more beef per capita than any other place in the world. So of course, a rich, you know, lovely feisty Tannat with tannins and acid and you know, plenty of flavor is going to work really nicely with, you know, a slow roasted beef. So I think sometimes the diet, the gastronomy also really influences the style of wine that comes from that region. And those pairings can be magical, and every time you taste those wines, it takes you back to that moment that you were eating that dish.
Makes sense.
Yeah, we should ask the sommelier about pairings.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in Istanbul 2 years ago. I mean, obviously that whole, you know, that part of the world, when we were talking about Persian cuisine and the Middle East, I think it's a cuisine that we often, I mean, I think a lot of people do know about it, but we don't talk enough about how incredible and how enhanced they become, especially if you get the right glass of wine. And kind of going to Amanda's point, while I was there, all I drank was Turkish wine, but indigenous grapes. And that was really a very special experience. Of course, here I was in one of the most magical cities in the world, you know, sort of where East meets West. But there's a ton of potential in this country of Turkey. I mean, obviously, there's some restrictions there due to their government, but you know, there's over 125 wineries. It is one of the oldest historical places when it comes to winemaking and wine growing, and I think they're still the 5th largest grower when it comes to wine grapes. So I think that some place to definitely explore. But the food and the wine definitely are magical, and Turkish cuisine is just on another level.
Oh, you're making me so hungry again. Let's go to segment 3. We're going to talk about wine tourism.
Wine travel offers diverse experiences, from luxury estates to small family wineries. Large estates provide high-end tastings, fine dining, and vineyard accommodations, while smaller wineries offer intimate tours with winemakers and handcrafted wines. Wine routes like France's Alsace wine route, South Africa's Stellenbosch Trail, and Portugal's Douro Valley highlight regional specialties. Activities range from grape stomping during harvest to barrel tastings, blending workshops, and vineyard picnics. Timing matters. Spring and fall offer ideal weather with fewer crowds, while harvest season brings hands-on experiences. Accommodations vary from vineyard guest houses to boutique hotels. Planning ahead is key. Booking tastings, arranging transportation, and researching local etiquette enhance the trip. For a seamless experience, guided wine tours provide curated itineraries, allowing visitors to enjoy wines responsibly while learning about the region's terroir and traditions. Thoughtful preparation ensures a memorable and enjoyable wine-focused journey.
Yannick, what elements make for an inclusive and meaningful wine tourism experience? And you referenced this earlier, especially for those with mobility challenges.
Well, first off, I think communication, right? I think me as the person who's reaching out to the winemaker and organizing the trip, trying to be as transparent and letting them know what my expectations are and being realistic. I think sometimes there are people who go to these wine regions and their expectations are a bit too high. I mean, you have to remember a lot of these places that you will be visiting are pretty rural. And I think there's also this kind of misguided interpretation that a lot of these owners of these wineries have a lot of money, right? A lot of them live very simple lives. And so that's something to really understand. I think that when you're visiting these places, I think it's really kind of understanding that you're putting your feet on the ground, you're getting away from wherever you're from, and you're kind of just living according to nature. And if you can take that approach, you're going to have a superb time. But like I said, in my case, it's really up to me. It's my responsibility to just kind of be as transparent and give all the details to whoever I'm going to visit or to wherever I'm going to go. And generally speaking, I mean, these winemakers and people that work on these farms, they're some of the kindest and most generous people. I mean, you know, I go to places like in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I can tell you, they are so appreciative. You know, they're like, my gosh, you're coming all the way from New York on a wheelchair to come visit me in the middle of nowhere. I will figure this out. Don't worry about it. And so, yeah, I can't really say I've never had a bad experience, to be honest with you.
Oh, that's good to hear. Madeline, what's your checklist for the ultimate wine getaway?
I'm kind of with Yannick. You know, it's one of those situations where your expectations versus reality are often very different. And my example is this: having extensive experience in American wine destinations on the West Coast, like in Napa and Sonoma and Paso Robles. They have extensive information, wine routes, all this very easy to set up of tasting appointments and all that kind of a thing. But when you go to Bordeaux, which you think should be, well, that should be a level up, right? Because it's Bordeaux, right? Well, not exactly. Like, you're going to be trying to figure out getting appointments. You're going to have to really do some research. It's hard to figure out where the right roads to take and that kind of a thing. There's not as much information. And the expectation that you're going to get treated hospitality style like you might in Napa Valley isn't always the same in another country. And language barriers aside, and at the end of the day, when you're tasting wine, everyone's happy. So you won't have any problems, but it will be a little bit of a shocker at how well we're taken care of here in the United States versus going to another region where you really do need to reach out. I can remember texting a winemaker on the cell phone in Australia, and he's being like, yeah, you just go down the red dirt road, and that was like a real road. It was a real road, but it didn't really feel like a real road. And you were going and going, and it's like the old stone house, and we just drive and drive forever down this road past some kangaroos, that kind of thing. And we're about to turn back. And then there was an old stone house. And that's where I met this amazing winemaker in South Australia, who served me some really awesome Shiraz, which I didn't know was about to win some point scores or whatever. But it was definitely felt like I was taking a risk driving down that dirt road until I arrived. So yeah, don't be afraid if it gets a little weird. It does get better once you have that glass of wine in front of you.
Make a left at the Wallabies.
Yeah, exactly.
Alder, do you have a preference for small family-owned vineyards or large estates?
Both offer really interesting and distinct different experiences. If people want to have kind of a luxury experience, that's the equivalent of hanging out in the lobby of, a $800 a night hotel, you can have that in the wine world by, visiting some of the top chateaus in some of these places like France or Italy. But for me, when I travel to enjoy wine, I really enjoy getting to know the people who are really have their hands in it, right? The winemakers with dirty boots and dirt under their fingernails. And typically you don't get that so much at one of those big fancy chateaus, that are owned by the Rothschilds, for instance, or something like that. And so I have a bias towards, finding these smaller producers who make incredibly high quality wine, who might have been doing it for many generations in their family, but are still pretty humble in terms of what they offer from a tourist infrastructure standpoint. But what you get then is time to spend with another person who thinks very deeply and constantly about the sort of artisan product that they're producing, and who really will want you to engage with it at their level. When you go and visit one of these big chateaus, you sit in fancy, expensive furniture and admire the view and have great hospitality with somebody waiting on you hand and foot. But when you go to one of these smaller producers, they're like, "Oh, do you want to see the vineyard? Come on out. Let me show you." And they'd take you up the top of the hill and show you this one particular plot where the vines are really old, that their grandfather, brought them up there when they were a kid, and they tell stories, and you can appreciate what's in the glass so much more by knowing where it comes from. And where it comes from is not only that place, standing there in the vineyard with the winemaker, but also that person and what makes them tick. What do they think about? How do they enjoy? And what are they trying to achieve? And so that's a particular kind of experience that I value.
It's so interesting how that passion and history actually makes it taste better.
I say that what's in the glass is, of course, important. It's got to be delicious. It's got to be great. But what makes wine meaningful and memorable are the stories that surround it. And those stories are about where it is in the world and who the winemaker is and why they've been there and what is the culture of that place and all that stuff around that you don't get in an antiseptic, luxury tasting room.
So don't taste wine in a vacuum.
I also think that we're really lucky in the wine industry, because everyone in the wine industry is passionate about making wine. And so even if the wine is awful, some of the better conversations I've had have been with passionate winemakers. I mean, India is a struggle to make, the quality of Indian wine is not the highest in the world, but some of the most memorable conversations I've had have been with winemakers there who have struggled so much to be able to make these wines on a cultural level, as well as a climatic one. And those conversations just, stand in my head for a lifetime. They'll be there. And to kind of Yannick's point as well, I think when you're planning, there's two ways to do wine tourism. One is something that's very organized. You have your hit list of wineries, perhaps you go with a group. And the other is just to kind of wing it. And if you're going to do it independently, I think it can be one of the most rewarding experiences, but you also just have to give yourself time, and you have to lower that expectation and just let it happen and let people kind of spend time with you as they wish. Some of my, best times in wine regions have been when things have gone completely wrong. Like in northern Croatia, we had this hideous kind of electric storm. I actually love an electric storm, but it just meant I couldn't leave my Airbnb for 3 days because the roads were all washed out. And so having the neighbors kind of looking after you and serving you their wine and not speaking the same language at all, but having a wonderful time with them, because, when the unexpected happens, it can be the most memorable, but you have to be willing and open to those experiences.
Amanda, how frequently were you winging it in your around the world in 80 harvests?
All the time. every single, I was always winging it because I went independently. And so I'd reach out to winemakers and people within wine to have conversations with them, to learn from them. But I was always, driving myself. Nothing was organized by anyone else. And I love driving in the wine regions. There are some the wine regions, as several of us have said, typically are in a very beautiful place. So just having that kind of experience of driving around and absorbing nature, whether you're doing it by bike or by car or by horse, just really kind of being part of that landscape. And yeah, I love winging it, but it requires a lot of patience. You need to be quite chilled out to wing it.
It's a good go-to strategy for discovering hidden gem wineries in unfamiliar regions.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Let's go to segment 4.
Fine wine appreciates in value due to scarcity, provenance, brand prestige, and critical acclaim. Bordeaux First Growths, Burgundy Grand Crus, and Napa Cult wines are among the most sought-after investment-grade wines. Market demand, vintage quality, and aging potential influence long-term value. Proper storage is crucial. Investment wines should be kept at 50 to 59 degrees Fahrenheit with 60 to 70% humidity, away from light and vibration. Provenance must be documented for resale value. Investment options range from direct vineyard ownership, which requires expertise and capital, to wine funds, which offer diversification with lower entry costs. En primeur or wine futures purchasing allows buyers to secure wines before bottling, potentially at a lower price. Understanding legal and tax implications is essential. Tracking market trends through reputable sources ensures informed decisions. Whether collecting bottles or acquiring land, strategic investment in wine can yield significant returns.
Alder, you've written about investment-grade wines and storage. What foundational advice would you give someone looking to start collecting seriously?
Well, I think we have to distinguish between collecting wine and investing in wine. And I have very strong opinions about the difference between those two things. But collecting wine is really about, buying wine and saving it because you intend to drink it someday, and that you're interested in what happens to that wine as it ages over time. Because some wines, in fact, don't hit their peak of quality and what they're capable of expressing for some time after they've been bottled. And so, as you mentioned in your video, storage of those wines is quite important. There's nothing worse than buying a bottle of wine, storing it improperly, and then having it, not taste what you want it to taste like, or to have it be ruined through improper storage. So storage is really important from a collecting perspective, and then understanding how much you're going to drink and when you're going to drink it is quite important from a collecting perspective, because like so many things, when people get into the collecting habit, it's very easy to buy too much wine and very easy to get to a point where you realize, and it's happening, I see it happen over and over again, where people, get older in their lives and they realize there's just no way I'm going to be able to drink all this wine. So you spent all this money and invested all this time and energy, and then you have to do something, to get rid of that collection or pass it on to your heirs. And so, moderation is quite important in being realistic with your collecting, so that you're buying things that you're eventually going to drink and enjoy with friends and family, but not necessarily amassing too much wine too quickly. And a collector's and wine drinkers' tastes change over time. And what I see also is in collectors is buying a whole bunch of wine when they first get started, and then they realize 10 years later that they don't actually like that wine that they bought early in their collecting career, and their tastes have changed over time. So that's tricky. So that's about collecting. About investing, very simple advice: don't invest in wine.
What do you really think, Alder?
I think it's one of the dumbest places you can go in terms of an alternative asset category. One, because it can be easily ruined through, no fault of your own. And two, especially if we're talking to retirees here, the way that wine appreciates, if you're headed towards retirement, you're not going to have enough time for that wine to appreciate in value to make it a good investment. Never mind the fact that these wine funds are often actively managed and charge very high fees on an annual basis. So you're losing a great degree of your potential growth by paying these fees to these fund managers. It's just a bad idea. Buy wine that you intend to drink, save it if you want to let it get older and get better, but don't think that you're going to use it to somehow increase your net asset portfolio or your nest egg. Makes sense. Amanda, your thoughts?
I kind of have something slightly morally against investing in wine as an asset, because I think wine was, created to be enjoyed, to be drunk, to be shared. So even though I can see that some people do turn a nice little profit on that, I'm much more of the philosophy that wine should be something that we drink and that we enjoy together. And I love collectors when they've got, when they've been collecting lots of wines and they realize that they're not going to be able to drink it all. And so they start getting very generous and opening with friends and, giving people these opportunities to taste wines that they wouldn't be able to otherwise. And so, for me, wine is all about that social aspect rather than the financial asset. So a good tip on picking your friends. Yeah, if there are any collectors out there that want to kind of plow through some wines, I am more than willing to come and help. There's no better friend than a major wine collector, let me tell you. Great. That's invaluable advice. Amanda, are there, I guess, if we're not talking about investment for appreciation, let's just talk taste. Are there South American wines flying under the radar? Definitely. And actually, I think you have so many South American wines that are massively undervalued and appreciated and can age beautifully with time. And so if you don't have too much money to invest in wine, if you invest in some of these beautiful, especially from Chile and Argentina, and some from Uruguay as well, if you invest in those, you can kind of hold them, buy a case of 12, and then just kind of keep opening a bottle every other year or so. And with the prices that Burgundy are at nowadays, I really think you can get some gorgeous Chardonnay here, especially that you could really hold for a long time and enjoy for a fifth of the price. Madeline, what are your thoughts? Do you guide people who want to turn a wine hobby into an investment?
Well, when you're talking investment, generally people are looking at different types of sizes of sums of money. And so it's a physical asset that's large and it has a time base on it. It's a high risk investment. So you really do need to know a lot. I'm kind of with Yannick in the sense that, like, unless you're already very knowledgeable and have a way to sell your wines, I think I've seen a couple of models where collectors latch on to a restaurant, or a restaurant builds a collection. And that to me makes a lot of sense when you have a restaurant that's sort of managing a library of wines. They have a huge, deep collection of old vintages that they can share and continue to sell and actually make money and profit on over a long period of time. And I think maybe for a restaurant group or something like that, it might make sense. But if you're at that level, you're already pretty hardcore into it. And there are a few examples of collectors, again, that essentially their collection is available through a restaurant. I've seen that kind of relationship work out well as well. But again, these are people who are invested very heavily in the hospitality industry, and they're essentially building culture through this large library of collection in that restaurant or in that city. Great cities around the world have amazing collections and libraries of wine, which they share, through their wine lists. And I think that's a good example of if you were to call it an investment of wine over a long term. So I on the one hand, I really like the idea of collecting because, as Alder said, some wines get better over time. Like if you're drinking a Brunello di Montalcino young, you're really missing out on the height of that moment of when that wine is the best. And so that is something that you can do over maybe a decade period of time. And you can do that on your own and you can have a fun time with it. But like these like big wine groups and these storage facilities in outside of London that have these massive bottles, and the wine goes from the winery to the storage facility, bonded storage facility, and nobody ever drinks it. It's now become a commodity product. And it takes that wine out of the marketplace of enjoyment foundationally. And I think that is actually hurting the ability for us to taste and enjoy bottles like Burgundy and Bordeaux, which are now out of reach of enjoyment because now they have been commodified as this asset class. And so, maybe I'm being a little bit selfish in saying this. I want my Burgundy cheaper now. But it seems like it's going to hurt more than it's going to help.
Yannick, how do you think about this? Do you think about the quality of the wine? Do you consider long-term value?
I mean, listen, from my personal experience, just this past weekend, I was very lucky. I had 2 bottles of wine, both from Barolo. One was 1975 and 1978. Now, this is not what I normally drink. And why I'm saying all of this is that I do think that the way my palate has been cultivated, I don't drink old bottles on a regular basis. You know what I mean? And so I think sometimes we get caught up on the hype of drinking old bottles and that they have to taste great. Now, granted, both of the bottles were great. They were good, and there was nothing wrong with them. But from the way my brain was trained and the way that I've cultivated my palate, I kind of thought to myself, gosh, I wish they were a little bit younger. I kind of, like that little tanginess of the tannins and all that kind of stuff. And so I think some of these wines that I've been opening up for private collectors that come by and all that, some of them are just, I don't tell them. I just kind of put on the face like, okay, well, if you enjoy it, that's the most important thing. These wines, there's only a very small percentage of wines that actually have this good fortune to kind of like go beyond certain amount of decades, right? And especially with white wines, I am totally opposed to drinking white wines, generally speaking. I mean, there's always the exception to the rule, like maybe some Chenin Blancs and obviously Rieslings. But I love white wines that are young and vibrant and refreshing and where you can really feel the kind of vibrancy of it all. So I think a lot of these, putting these bottles of wines and saving them for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years can be slightly overrated, but overrated in the sense, how cultivated is your palate? Just like myself, if you were to give me a scotch, a single malt scotch whiskey from Islay, I would not enjoy it. It's not to say that I would not appreciate it. I just would not enjoy it because I just don't drink single malt scotch, let alone drink something that's intense, So I really would not understand it. And I think that the same thing applies with older bottles of wine. I think that people are falling in love, not with the wine itself, but with the actual label, the name, the vintage, and sort of like the kind of name dropping.
I love it. We're going to bring it home and go to the final segment.
Eco-friendly winemaking is reshaping the industry. Organic wines eliminate synthetic chemicals, biodynamic wines treat vineyards as self-sustaining ecosystems, and natural wines use minimal intervention. These methods improve soil health, reduce water use, and promote biodiversity. Sustainable wineries adopt renewable energy, composting, and water conservation practices. Regenerative farming, including cover cropping and reduced soil disturbance, helps maintain vineyard ecosystems. Energy-efficient facilities lower carbon footprints. Wine tourism impacts sustainability. Domestic travel reduces emissions, while supporting small-scale, local winemakers encourages eco-conscious production. Choosing wines with organic or biodynamic certifications ensures responsible sourcing. Retailers increasingly stock sustainable wines, making it easier for consumers to prioritize environmentally friendly options. As demand grows, these practices influence the future of viniculture, ensuring long-term viability for both vineyards and wine lovers.
Madeline, I'm hoping that we can get a quick answer out of you before you have to go. Do you have a favorite example of a winery turning sustainability into brand storytelling? Or
okay, that was
go ahead.
Tablas Creek in Paso Robles went ROC certified, so regenerative organic certification. They were the first winery, I think, in the world maybe to do that, and that's the Patagonia guys regenerative organic certification, and it sort of started a whole movement of that. We're seeing a lot more wineries doing that, and they've fully leaned into it, and I think it's changing slowly but surely, changing what is fine wine. And thanks for having me. It was wonderful to see you all again. We all know each other in the wine industry, so I wish you all well.
Thank you, Madeline. Amanda, how do you see sustainability influencing wine tourism and local economies in the year ahead?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure in terms of the kind of tourism, how much people really consider it, but I think in terms of the wine industry, in terms of the market, it's incredibly important. One thing that I do think we perhaps don't talk about enough is the importance of sustainability based on the place, because organic doesn't work, for example, in a wine region like Uruguay, where you have very high rainfall. The amount of copper and sulfur that you'd be using would just, it's just not sustainable. You know, to be organic would be a negative in Uruguay. And so I do think we need to open the conversation to try and understand what sustainability means to each place and how that can be different, without having this kind of idea that one certification fits all, because it really doesn't. And we definitely see that in the very diverse climates that we have here in South America. And social sustainability, I think, is incredibly important. But I think it's more something that people think about in terms of purchasing wine rather than thinking in terms of visiting wineries. And it will be interesting in the future to see if it does kind of shape wine tourism. But I think we're a bit ahead of our time in that sense.
Interesting point. Yannick, what's your perspective? Like, as a business person, do you support sustainable practices in your business?
Of course, and I think most importantly, and I think we've all kind of encountered that, there are certainly a lot of wineries and businesses that were leaders as far as farming practices, winemaking, so on, but then only to find out that that didn't incorporate, or it wasn't practiced as how they were treating their workers, paying below minimum wages, not providing the right benefits so they can have a good quality of life. And I think that's really important. I think that for people like ourselves, all that are here on the panel, of course, we want the wine to taste great. Of course, it's great that if they're biodynamic, if they're certified organic, that's wonderful. But if we're to find out that the winery owner is just really not an ethical person, and the people that are working there are not being treated humanely, there's no way that I know personally, and I know I can speak on both Alder and Amanda, that we would support such a thing. And I think that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah, and I just need to give a shout out to Yannick, who's essentially probably the world's leading sommelier putting together wine lists as advocacy. So the wine list that Yannick has put together, in particular, the one that he put together for his restaurant Contento, was remarkable in its selection as a means of pointing people towards ethical production, sustainable wineries made by people of color. Really just an incredible job. So you're talking to kind of one of the world experts in this question.
Thank you, Alder.
Yannick, now that Contento is not open, how do we access that? Do we go to your store?
Yeah, you go to the store, but I mean, listen, the truth of the matter is that there are a lot of other sommeliers and other wine buyers that are doing the same thing, in their own kind of way. And so it's just a matter of the individual who's looking to find these type of wineries, the consumer. There are people that are out there. I mean, it's grown and it's out there. I mean, I can send you a list of great sommeliers and buyers that are very much doing the same thing, and I'm very proud of them. I mean, it's amazing. It's great to see.
I have to say that being near New York, I'm so sad reading the reviews about your restaurant, Yannick, because I don't get to experience your food and your drink when it was like so close to me. It's like there's this like small window that I missed.
Yeah.
And to missed opportunities. Alder, how can sustainability intersect with preservation of old vines?
Well, so in order for vines to get old and grow old and continue to produce wine, you have to farm them in a way that is by definition sustainable, right? I mean, you can't sustain the life of a vine without farming it somewhat sustainably. That means different things in different places, as Amanda has said. But I think one of the more interesting sort of frontiers of sustainability studies when it comes to the world of wine is really using the old vine vineyards of the world as examples and as laboratories for understanding what allows a vine to last that long. And so these old vineyards in many cases are storehouses of old genetic material that in some cases are not available today. You can go and find old varieties of grapes, old particular biotypes of grapes that are not cultivated anymore, but have managed to last hundreds of years in a single place and adapt to climate, the climate that has changed in that time period. And so there's a resurgence and interest in looking at these old vineyards as sources for and perhaps maps towards how we can plant vineyards for the future that can deal with a changing climate. And so that's one of the things, the thoughts behind this old vine registry that you mentioned that I'm involved in, which is this sort of public database, a Wikipedia, if you will, of old vine vineyards around the world, with the idea that you can't preserve what you don't know about. So our first job and the focus of this database is to try and collect information on as many old vine vineyards as we can in the world, what's grown there, where they are, who's responsible for them, so that researchers and viticulturalists around the world can learn from them and exploit the resources that they might be to help us build a more sustainable wine industry.
Are vineyards embracing change fast enough in the face of climate impact?
Certainly there are vineyards around the world that are becoming unviable because of climate change. They work on a geologic scale or a plant-based scale, if you will, over time. So in some cases they need human help to adapt. But in other cases, some of these old vine vineyards seem to be weathering the vagaries of climate change much better than some of the newer ones that we've planted. And so the question is why, and what can we learn from that?
Amanda, any final thought?
I think just one point about the old vines that I think is one of the kind of key movements in sustainability today is this return to polyculture and having different kind of cultivations within the same area. And I think that's a conversation we're going to start to have a lot more in the future, and something I'm quite excited to see people returning to, thanks to the kind of beautiful plantations of old vines, but really kind of bringing more biodiversity, which I think is one of the kind of key movements in sustainability in the environment.
Thank you. Yannick, final thought? Oh, I think you were muted.
Sorry about that. No, I think to kind of tag along to what Amanda and what Alder was saying, I agree with Amanda. The sort of it's great to see a lot of these wineries or wine regions where there's other crops growing, that it's just not one monocrop. When you go to places like Bordeaux and you're driving up the left bank, and I love Bordeaux, don't get me wrong, and all you see is just vineyards, you don't see one tree for kilometers away. I think that's a problem in itself. And so trying to see, and now you're seeing more of a synergy, and you're seeing winemakers and farmers seeing the benefits of having other crops than just vines. And I think that's sort of the future in farming.
Thank you. We're going to leave it there. To our inspired moneymakers watching, listening, what a ride. I hope that you enjoyed this as much as I did. One of my favorite takeaways from today's panel is the idea that wine isn't just something that you drink. It's a lens through which you can explore the world. Every bottle has a story. Visiting the places where those stories begin enrich and transform how you experience wine. So if you're feeling inspired, here's your one assignment for the week. Pick a wine region that you've never explored before. Maybe that's Georgia, Uruguay, South Africa. Find a bottle from there, open it, do a little research on the region, maybe even pair it with a local dish. And let it be the start of your own voyage into viniculture. Thank you for staying to the end. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend who's always up for a good glass and a great adventure. A shout out to the Inspired Money production team, producer Bradley, John Eaglefeather, and Chad Lawrence for doing the work behind the scenes. Finally, let's thank our amazing panelists once again. Be sure to follow them and learn more about them. Amanda Barnes, her book, The South America Wine Guide. You can find her at amandabarnes.co.uk. You can also find her at southamericawineguide.com. Amanda, anywhere else you want to send people or anything you want to share about what you're doing?
No, just thank you. It was a real pleasure. It was lovely to join you all today. It's very nice to see some friendly faces and be able to talk about these topics together. So thank you.
Alder Yarrow is founder of vinography.com. So check that out. Check out his book, The Essence of Wine, and also the Old Vine Registry. Alder, any place you want to, or anything you want to share with everybody?
No, I'm just at Vinography on every major social media platform, so you can easily find me. Just remember, like pornography, but vino, and you'll never forget it.
So much valuable information there. Definitely everybody should, use that resource to your benefit. And Yannick Benjamin, you can find him at wineonwheels.org, beaupierrewine.com. Yannick, anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that, sometimes I hear people being a bit pessimistic about the world of wine, but I just want to say that I feel better than ever about it. Things go up and down, and so I think sometimes to go forward, you have to, sometimes go backwards a little bit, and that's all it is. And right now, we're living in an incredible time where winemaking is better than ever, and you'll just see constant improvements in some regions that are just constantly improved. So just enjoy the ride for now and be patient.
Yes. The world is full of ups, downs, and back and forths. So I like your positive glass half full. We will enjoy the ride. And finally, Madeline Puckette, who had to leave at the top of the hour, check out her book, Wine Folly, The Essential Guide to Wine. You can also find her at winefolly.com. I really enjoyed having all the panelists here. I hope that your lunch or dinner or breakfast, whenever you're listening or watching this, tastes better because of the company that we shared today. The next Inspired Money episode will be next week. We're talking about watch collecting as legacy treasures, timepieces for retirement generations. That's on Wednesday, April 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern. So I'm enjoying that this lifestyle topic continues. We did 2 weeks of wine. We're talking about watches. I think we talk about retirement investing the week after that. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Until next time, do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.